Hello dear chess lovers, it's white to play in this position. I want you to find two different winning moves for white. This will be a nice segue to today's discussion, folks. We are talking about square awareness today, folks. One of my students told me recently that while weak players focus on pieces, strong players focus on squares at a chessboard. They not only identify loose pieces, but also potentially loose squares that can be attacked, that can be put pressure, and so on. So this will be interesting video because I want to talk about this mostly in a blunder-check context. I'm working on a course on blunder-check, and I will also show you how people blunder where they forget specific squares on the board that could become weak and so on. Okay, but let's first start from an attacking context. We are searching for a winning move for white in this position. What's the search strategy? First, the orientation phase, of course. White has the material advantage, the queen versus rook. Okay? What else are you seeing? Look at the loose pieces on the board. That's always relevant. This rook is loose, attacked 0 times, defended 0 times. Also the bishop, right? That's the definition of a loose piece. If the attack and defense ratio is identical, then those pieces become loose. Obviously, our attention is directed to those pieces. What else are you seeing? How about the king on h8, folks? Maybe you're not seeing the back rank problems. Maybe you're not seeing this diagonal. Maybe you're also noticing a specific square on the board that the knight is putting pressure already, right? So now it becomes more interesting. Maybe we can talk about those loose squares as well. This square is attacked once and defended only once by the king, which means if white puts more pressure on that square, we can actually give mate to the black king, right? So that's a function of this training. We are noticing potential weaknesses around the enemy king as well. Okay, so first things first, let's go through the first question. Loose pieces, can we create a double attack? And you know this already, queens are the best attackers in chess. They are so mobile and they are great in creating multiple attacks, double attacks. In this case, queen e1 is a great move, congratulations, because you create a double attack, and this means that we are winning the game on the next move, because the only way for black to save against this threat is bishop h4, and you're a great player if you solve your next move against this. I'm seeing this beautiful mate on e8, and black is helpless, right? So a very short 3-ply calculation and the game is over. After bishop h4, there's also, of course, queen e5 check, which forces a mate in, well, 3 moves. This is longer, but that's still mate, of course. So it's a great solution, right? To start with queen e1, and we are winning the game by attacking those loose pieces. Well, now talk about this square on g7, folks. Can the queen create a double attack against one of those loose pieces and also against the square on g7? And you're a great player if you solve the move queen g1. That's a great double attack. This case, you're attacking the rook on f2, but also a specific square on g7. This creates double threat, right? The first threat is mate with queen g7. The second threat is queen takes f2. Black has no response against that, right? Black has no way to deal with both threats. They are losing their rook on the next move. Let's say with rook f1 check. Well, I take, and of course, that's just the winning position for white. So what this example teaches us is that as we are growing stronger in chess, we should not only focus on the pieces, but also become aware of potentially weak points, weak squares, even though they're empty as such, right? So my student told me that it was very difficult for him as he was growing stronger to notice specific squares to be targeted, empty squares, vacant squares, just like g7, that could be targeted with our pieces. He was only focusing on those pieces on the board, pawns maybe, right? But never paying attention to a square that was simply empty. And this is very interesting, actually, whether there's a certain evolution or certain development of people's chess expertise, that you start from looking at the pieces first, loose pieces and so on, to be captured and so on, and only gradually, right, your awareness is building around specific squares. Why this square specifically is relevant? Well, because we're already putting pressure on that square, right? Now we are talking about also attacking against the opponent's king. And what's the first question usually in those cases? What is the weakest square around the opponent's king, right? Because that's when mates take place. G7 is a very weak square because it hit once and defended only by the king. No other black piece is guarding that square. That makes it the most relevant weak square around the black king. And that's always relevant, right, for our pieces to target. We have a queen, and suddenly we create a beautiful, notorious queen and knight attacking combo. And that's the reason, right? They are super powerful when it comes to attack in chess. Now, I mentioned today's episode, I will test you with so many beautiful blunder check examples. I will see whether you can transfer your knowledge to defensive context, whether you can prevent blunders and give those beautiful mates to your opponents, okay? Well, very simple question, folks. Do we capture the bishop with the knight or with the bishop on g7? You have two choices. Please avoid the blunder. You're a great player if you came up with the move bishop takes e5, folks, because this capture doesn't allow a mate in one. Can you please visualize the problem behind the move knight takes e5, folks? What is the drawback of this knight moving away from d7? Yes, we are talking about specific squares becoming weak around our king. You see it, right? If you take with the knight, then you allow queen d8 mate. That will be devastating. So you see, now we are applying the skill of square awareness to a defensive context in preventing blunders. That's so crucial. And people again go wrong with this because you see, in his mind, he says doesn't matter, right? Because there's no piece to be captured on d8. What he's not paying attention is that this queen is actually targeting this specific empty square on d8. This square is only guarded by the black king, but white was putting so much pressure on that specific square with those two pieces, and just leads to a mate in one. This is a beautiful, simple blunder check puzzle. So the lesson is clear. We should not only pay attention to pieces, but also specific squares. Now, can you solve this puzzle then? D takes e5 happens. You have two choices, folks. Do you take back with the pawn or with the knight? Now we are looking at a very similar example, right? In, let's say, two plies earlier than before. Two choices. Please avoid the blunder, folks. Let's do it together, folks. Can you see that the d file is about to be opened up, either like this or with knight takes e5? So you should already start to pay attention to those pieces for white that is indirectly putting pressure on the specific square on d8. That's a weak point around your king, and you should be already vigilant about that from this position. Otherwise, you will commit a blunder. Okay? So the correct move is d takes e5, folks. Black has no choice but to take back with the pawn. Why? Well, your knight stays in put in stopping queen d8 mates. Your knight is interposing against their threat of queen d8 mates. You should keep your knight on d7, and yes, white can take on e5. And can we, for example, take back on e5? Is this a good move or a blunder? Can you please tell me, folks? Yes, that will be a great big blunder if you take on e5 and allow queen d8 mate. You should be able to see it. I won't put it on the board. That's good visualization exercise. But black is a very nice move in this position. Knight takes e4, discovered attack on the queen. Also on the bishop on e5. If white recaptures, you take back with the bishop. Not with the knight again. This will be a big blunder, mate in one, right? But if you take back the bishop, your bishop is an amazing piece and black is totally fine in this position. You see, after d takes e5, there's only one safe recapture for black, and it's totally to do with square awareness that you should breed as black. Well, knight takes e5 allows, you tell me, bishop takes e5, and the pawn cannot recapture the bishop because knight already left d7, directly exposing an attack on the queen and the rook on, again, on that specific empty square on d8. I'll show you one more example that I recently witnessed in an online game. White in this position is down a piece. Black has an extra knight. White player captured the pawn on e4. The question is, should black recapture the rook or should black play knight a6? I will give you two choices. Okay, folks? What is the correct move and why? Why? You're a great player if you found the move knight a6. You're connecting your rooks and your king is safe. If they capture on e8, right, your rook will simply recapture and black has an extra knight with a winning position here. In an online game, black player played the move rook takes e4 and that's a blunder. And can you please tell me why? The funny thing is this, folks, in this position, white player played the move rook d8 check and allowed queen takes d8, right? When he was going for this check, he didn't see the queen was on f6. But what is the correct move for white in this position? Yes, you're seeing this specific square on c8. That square has been weakened after the rook left e8. And this is very meaningful because the entire back rank is weak for black. And this will lead to a mate on the next turn. So after rook takes e4, black must have been careful in rejecting rook takes e4, because if you take, then this specific square is becoming weak as a result. Why is that relevant? Because of the chess patterns, right? Back rank is always a relevant chess pattern. King safety is the most important thing in chess. You should at all times pay attention to back rank issues. So in this specific case, it's not because of the d8 square, but because of the c8 square, right? Now we are talking about two different specific empty squares that are very relevant for black to reject this move. Okay, it's funny, it's a double blindness. So black took on e4 and white played, instead of queen c8 mate, they played the move rook d8 and black won the game after queen takes d8, because white cannot even do this, folks, because of this, right? Again, we are talking about specific squares that are very, very weak and they're very relevant for our pieces to target. Another puzzle, folks, black to play. Do you think bishop takes f6 is a good move? Can you please go through what we talked about so far in this episode and justify and correctly blunder check the move bishop takes f6? What can be the problem behind the move bishop takes f6? And what should black maybe do instead? Okay, folks, the specific problem of bishop takes f6, which is a blunder, is that after e takes f6, you see, you are weakening this specific square on g7, but also this empty square on h6. You're inviting queen h6 followed by queen g7 mate. You see, it's not that you're losing a piece by force, but by taking on f6, you're weakening two different squares, those dark squares, and you invite a disaster after, let's say, knight c8, queen h6, and the game is over because black has no defense against queen g7 mate. You see, for this mate to take place, white did not capture any of your pieces. None of your pieces was relevant, but specific squares were relevant. And as you grow stronger as a player, as we mentioned, your square awareness should also improve. You're talking about not only about loose pieces, but yes, maybe you can even talk about loose squares. Can we talk about loose squares in chess? Well, weak squares are different, by the way. Yeah, we can talk about weak squares, but that's mostly about outposts that no pawn can control. In this particular video, I'm talking about, right, those weaknesses, not only about the pieces, but also about specific vacant squares, just like here, folks, right? The disappearance of the bishop is very relevant because of queen h6 followed by queen g7. This will be your homework position, folks. White played the move queen b5 check. Black has two choices. Do you go queen d7 or knight d7 in this case? How do you cover this check? You have two choices, as mentioned. Is it queen d7 or knight d7? Please avoid the blunder. Please choose the safe option for black. And please write to me on YouTube, folks. I will comment and respond to every comment that you put. So let's summarize what we learned in this video, folks. Strong players don't only look at loose pieces, but also they pay attention to specific empty squares. They can target specific empty squares, or they don't blunder away and attack on specific and empty squares on the board, right? So that's a very nice connection and maybe transition or even evolution from piece awareness to square awareness. I wonder where you are right now as a chess player. Were those difficult puzzles for you? Please give me a feedback. And again, as we transfer skill, we have to look at it from different angles, right? That's why I show you so many blunder-check puzzles today. You're talking about defensive puzzles because chess is a very cruel game. You can lose a position by giving those options to the opponents. And again, blunder-check is a very, very difficult process to automatize and master. That's why right now I'm working on a blunder-check course, folks. It will be full of such puzzles that you will avoid one blunder. It will be instructive positions that will break it down. Also, psychological sides I will talk about. What can be the psychological causes behind those blunders? We are humans, we have cognitive biases, we have wishful thinking and confirmation biases. That's why blunder check is a difficult process, right? Because we seek information from the world that confirms our beliefs rather than seeking for the best option for our opponents. But in all the puzzles I show you today, you were supposed to actively think for the best move for your opponents. That's how you get better at the blunder check process. And if you stop those blunders, imagine how much of your rating gain that will happen to you, right? Your floor will be raised. You will stop giving away games unnecessarily, folks. That's why this blunder check part is one of the most cruel parts of chess that is so underrepresented in chess literature. That's why those puzzles are great. They're all human-made. They're all very relevant in a practical sense. I will categorize them in different categories, right? I will talk more about that in my future videos, by the way. But that's the course I'm working on right now. It's very exciting, folks. And I want to combine that course promo with those square awareness concepts that was always in my mind. So I thought it was a great combination to combine those concepts and present them to you in this video. Please give me a like and subscribe if you like this video. That's very important for me to be able to produce similar content for you. I'm here to help you improve your chess, and I will catch you on the next episode.